They say HOAs exist to keep communities peaceful. But that day, peace was shattered by a woman who thought rules mattered more than humanity. My autistic daughter was sitting quietly on a swing, humming softly, doing what calms her mind, when an HOA board member marched toward her like a judge delivering a sentence. No warning, no empathy, just rage. She raised a metal clipboard and brought it down on my child's arm. The scream that followed still echoes in my head. Parents froze. Kids stared. And the woman? She smiled, confident, powerful, untouchable. She called my daughter a disturbance. She called herself the authority. What she didn't know was that this wasn't just any child. She had no idea who my daughter's father was. She had no idea who she had just crossed. And by the time she realized the truth, her entire world was already falling apart. Before the story begins, let me ask you something important. From which city are you watching this video right now? Is it New York, Texas, California, Florida, or somewhere else? Please pause for 1 second and comment your city name below. I read every comment, and it helps this community grow stronger. Now, before we go any further, I need to say this clearly. If you believe abuse of power should never be ignored, if you believe children, especially special needs children, deserve protection, then subscribe to this channel right now. Because the story you're about to hear is not just emotional. It's real, it's painful, and it exposes how dangerous unchecked authority can become. What happened that day still keeps me awake at night, not because of anger, but because of the fear in my daughter's eyes. She is autistic. She doesn't understand cruelty. She doesn't understand hatred. She only understands fear when someone raises their voice and pain when someone raises their hand. The woman who hurt her believed she was untouchable. She believed her HOA badge gave her power over people's lives. She believed rules mattered more than compassion. And for a brief moment, she thought she had won. But what she didn't know, what she could never imagine, was who stood behind that child. This story isn't about revenge. It's about consequences. It's about standing up when silence feels easier. So take a deep breath. Stay with me until the end. Because once this story starts, there's no turning back. Now, let me tell you exactly what happened. That afternoon started like any other, and that's what makes it so hard to talk about. The sky was clear, the kind of soft blue that makes you believe nothing bad can happen. The community playground was half full, a few kids running around, a couple of parents on benches, everyone lost in their own small world. I remember checking my phone, answering a work email, feeling strangely calm. My daughter, Lily, was on the swing. She always chose the same 1 second from the left because it squeaked in a way that soothed her. Lily is autistic. Routine is her safety. Predictability is her comfort. When the world gets too loud, too fast, she hums quietly and flaps her hands, not to disturb anyone, but to regulate herself. That day, she was humming. Not loud, not disruptive, just enough for herself. I watched her feet move back and forth, the chains creaking gently. Her face was relaxed. For a moment, she looked happy. And as a parent of a special needs child, those moments are priceless. You guard them. You pray nothing interrupts them. I wish I had listened to that instinct. I noticed her before I heard her. A woman standing near the playground fence, arms crossed tight against her chest. Blonde hair pulled back, so hard it looked painful. Sunglasses hiding her eyes, but not her expression, that tight, irritated line of a mouth that tells you someone is already angry before a word is spoken. She wore a blazer. At a playground. Clipped to it was an HOA badge. At first, I didn't think much of it. HOA board members love their visibility. They love to be seen enforcing rules no one remembers agreeing to. I assumed she was there to scold someone about trash or parking. Then she started walking toward Lily. Fast, purposeful. My stomach tightened. I stood up instinctively, but I was still a few steps away. Close enough to see. Too far to stop what happened next. Hey! Her voice cut through the air like a slap. Lily stiffened. Loud voices overwhelm her. She stopped humming and grabbed the swing chains tightly, knuckles turning white. I said, "Stop that." The woman was right in front of her now, towering over a 9-year-old child. I called out, "She's with me." But the woman didn't look at me. She looked at my daughter like she was a problem that needed to be fixed. "You are violating community conduct rules," she snapped. "No disruptive noises in shared spaces." Lily didn't respond. When she's scared, words disappear. Her breathing became fast, shallow. She covered her ears. That's when the woman sighed, loudly, dramatically, and said the words that still make my hands shake when I remember them. "I am so tired of undisciplined children." She lifted the metal clipboard. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It didn't make sense. Adults don't hit children. Not in public. Not with witnesses. Not over something so small. The clipboard came down. A sharp metallic sound followed by a cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just raw pain. Lily screamed. Everything around me blurred. I don't remember running, but suddenly I was there, pulling my daughter into my arms. She was shaking violently, sobbing, trying to make herself smaller, like she wanted to disappear. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted. The woman stepped back, startled, not remorseful, just surprised I had intervened. "Sir, control yourself," she said coldly. "Your child was being disruptive." I looked at Lily's arm, red, already swelling. Her fingers trembled uncontrollably. "She's autistic," I said through clenched teeth. "You just assaulted a disabled child." The woman scoffed. "That's not my responsibility," she replied. "Rules are rules." Around us, parents were whispering. Some looked horrified. Others looked away, uncomfortable, unwilling to get involved. One mother hugged her own child closer. No one stepped forward. That silence hurt almost as much as the strike. "Apologize," I said. "Now." She straightened her blazer and adjusted her badge like armor. "I will not apologize for maintaining order," she said. "In fact, I think your aggressive behavior is the real issue here." Then she did something that left me speechless. She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police," she announced, "and the HOA office. This kind of behavior will not be tolerated." For a moment, I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it was. She had hit a child, and she was calling the authorities like she was the victim. Lily clung to me, her face buried in my chest. She kept repeating the same word over and over, barely audible. "Home, home, home." I stroked her hair, trying to steady my breathing. "Don't worry," I whispered to her. "Daddy's here." The woman paced back and forth while on the phone, loudly describing me as hostile and my daughter as out of control. She exaggerated every detail, performing for an invisible audience. When she hung up, she looked at me with a smug smile. "You should have taught her better," she said. "People like you always think rules don't apply to you." Something inside me hardened. I looked around at the playground, at the kids, the parents, the quiet sky that felt cruelly indifferent. And I realized this wasn't just about Lily. This was about power, about someone who believed a badge and a clipboard made them untouchable. She had no fear, no hesitation, no idea what she had just set in motion. As the distant sound of sirens began to approach, she crossed her arms confidently and said the words that would come back to haunt her. "This will end very badly for you." I looked down at my daughter, then back at her. And for the first time that day, I felt calm. Because I knew something she didn't. This was only the beginning. The police arrived faster than I expected. 2 patrol cars rolled into the community playground, lights flashing silently but unmistakably. The sound alone was enough to make Lily whimper. She pressed her face deeper into my chest, her fingers digging into my shirt like she was afraid I might disappear. "It's okay," I whispered, even though my own heart was pounding. "You're safe." The HOA woman straightened immediately. Her posture changed, shoulders back, chin lifted, like this moment was made for her. This was her stage. She walked toward the officers before they even stepped out of the car. "Thank God you're here," she said loudly. I feared for my safety. I felt a flash of disbelief, so sharp it almost made me dizzy. The officers approached calmly. One was older, experienced. The other looked younger, observant, eyes scanning the scene instead of locking onto the loudest voice. "What seems to be the problem, ma'am?" the older officer asked. She didn't hesitate. "This man became aggressive when I tried to enforce HOA conduct rules," she said, pointing at me like I was a criminal. "His child was causing a disturbance, screaming, making noises. I simply intervened." "Intervened how?" the younger officer asked. There it was, a crack. The woman hesitated for half a second too long. "I corrected the behavior," she said. "Parents these days don't discipline their children." The older officer turned to me. "Sir." I took a slow breath. "My daughter is autistic," I said calmly. She was sitting on a swing, humming. This woman struck her with a metal clipboard. The playground went quiet. The younger officer's eyes dropped to Lily. He noticed the way she rocked slightly, how her breathing was uneven, how her arm was pressed protectively against her body. "May I see her arm?" he asked gently. Lily shook her head, panic flashing across her face. "It's okay," I told her softly. "He just wants to help." Slowly, reluctantly, she let go. The red mark was darker now, swollen, angry. The officer's jaw tightened. "Ma'am," he said, turning back to the HOA woman, "did you strike this child?" Her face hardened. "I used reasonable force," she replied. "The rules." "There is no rule that allows you to hit a child," the officer interrupted. She scoffed. "She's not normal." The word hit the air like poison. The younger officer stiffened. "Ma'am, that's enough." She threw her hands up dramatically. Everyone wants to play the victim these days. Autism, anxiety, excuses for bad behavior. I felt Lily tense again, her breathing quickening. "Please stop talking," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. But the woman wasn't finished. "This community has standards," she continued. "We worked hard to keep it quiet, orderly. And then people like him move in and think they can do whatever they want. People like me?" I asked quietly. She glanced at me, eyes cold behind her sunglasses. "You know what I mean." The officers exchanged a look. The older one cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I need your identification." She handed it over confidently, like she'd done this 100 times before. "Also," the officer continued, "I need to ask, are you part of the HOA board?" "Yes," she said proudly. "Senior compliance officer." The younger officer raised an eyebrow. "Compliance with what, exactly?" She ignored him. "I expect a report to be filed against this man," she said. "And frankly, I want him fined, possibly removed from the community." I couldn't help it. I laughed. It slipped out, short, humorless, exhausted. She snapped her head toward me. "This is not funny." "No," I said softly. "It's not." The younger officer crouched slightly to Lily's level, keeping his distance. "Hey, there," he said gently. "My name's Alex. Do you like swings?" She nodded faintly. "You did nothing wrong," he said. "Okay." Her eyes filled with tears again. That's when the woman lost her patience. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "Are you going to do your job or not?" Alex stood up slowly. "I am doing my job," he said, "which includes protecting children." The older officer looked back at the ID, then at his partner. Something in his expression shifted, subtle but real. "Sir," he said to me, "do you mind if I ask you a few questions away from here?" I nodded. As we stepped aside, I heard the woman mutter loudly, "Unbelievable. This is what happens when you coddle people." The officer lowered his voice. "Sir, has this woman had prior interactions with your family?" "No," I said. "First time." He nodded. "We're going to need witness statements. Several parents are willing to talk." I glanced around. A few people avoided eye contact. Others looked ashamed. One mother gave me a small, apologetic nod. The officer continued, "There are also security cameras in this area. Community installed." I felt a flicker of relief. Behind us, the HOA woman was on her phone again. "Yes, this is outrageous," she said loudly. "They're siding with him. Yes, I know my rights." She paced like a trapped animal, confidence starting to crack at the edges. Alex returned from speaking with a witness. "Sir," he said to me, "we're filing this as potential assault on a minor." The words hung in the air. The woman froze. What? She snapped. That's absurd. Ma'am, Alex said firmly, you admitted to striking the child. I disciplined her, she corrected. That's not your role, he replied. Her face flushed red. You can't do this. Do you know who I am? The older officer finally spoke again. Yes, he said slowly, handing her ID back. We do. She smirked for about 2 seconds, then he added, and that doesn't change the law. For the first time since this began, I saw fear in her eyes. Not panic, not remorse. Fear of losing control. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time, not as a nuisance, not as someone beneath her, but as a threat she hadn't calculated. This isn't over, she hissed quietly as she passed me. I met her gaze. You're right, I said. It's not. As Lily clutched my hand and the officers began documenting everything, one truth became painfully clear. She thought the badge protected her. She thought authority made her untouchable. She had no idea how wrong she was, and she still had no idea who she was dealing with. After the officers left us to gather statements and evidence, I could feel the tension in the air. Lily clung to me, her small hands gripping mine like they were anchors in a storm. Her wide eyes scanned the playground nervously, watching the HOA woman pace and mutter, clearly unaware of what was about to unfold. I knew I couldn't let this go unnoticed, not just for Lily's sake, but for the sake of every child, every parent, every resident in that community who had ever felt powerless against someone who mistook a badge for authority. I took a deep breath. Then I made a call, the one call that would change everything. The woman noticed immediately. Her head snapped toward me, suspicion lighting her features. She didn't recognize the number on my phone. She didn't know I had connections she couldn't even imagine. 5 minutes later, black SUVs rolled into the community. The kind of SUVs that don't belong to private citizens but to people with influence, people who move in silence and authority. The HOA woman froze. For a second, her confidence wavered. She straightened, adjusting her blazer, her clipboard still clenched in one hand. She probably thought it was some kind of show, a parental threat overblown into drama. She had no idea she had just triggered a chain of events she couldn't control. From the SUVs stepped out 2 men, one older, calm, deliberate, and one younger, sharp-eyed, scanning the area with the precision of someone trained to notice even the smallest detail. I could see the subtle recognition on the younger man's face as his eyes fell on Lily. Not recognition of her, exactly, but an awareness that she was someone significant. The HOA woman whispered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. Who? Who are they? I let her fear build just a moment longer. Then I spoke, calm but firm. I am Lily's father. Her eyes widened. The clipboard fell from her hands. I am responsible for federal compliance investigations, including cases like yours, I continued, my voice low but unyielding. And you just assaulted a minor under my supervision. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She had no idea. She had just crossed a line she could never recover from. Pride, authority, and arrogance melted away, leaving only a pale, frozen fear. I stepped closer to Lily, holding her protectively. The men behind me were silent, observing, ensuring nothing would go wrong. The HOA woman glanced around, searching desperately for allies. But the playground was quiet. Witnesses watched. Parents whispered. For the first time, she was alone. I didn't know, she stammered. You didn't know? I asked, incredulous. You didn't know who you were hitting? You didn't know whose child you were hurting? She shrank back slightly. Her anger faltered, replaced by panic. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out an escape, a justification, a loophole. There wasn't one. The man in the black suit stepped forward. His presence was commanding, yet calm. Ma'am, he said softly, everything you just did is being documented. Every detail, every witness, every camera, and your actions will have consequences. The HOA woman looked at him, still trying to mask fear with bravado. I have connections. My husband knows people. I shook my head. Funny. So do I. Her knees went weak. The younger man nodded toward the cameras already installed around the playground. "Everything is recorded," he said. "Your actions, your words, your threats. And this footage will be reviewed." The HOA woman's face turned pale. For the first time, she realized this wasn't going to be swept under the rug. No amount of bluster, no HOA authority, no complaints about disruptive children would save her now. I knelt beside Lily, brushing her hair from her face. "It's okay," I whispered. "You're safe now." She looked up at me, tears in her eyes, and in that moment I saw something beyond fear. Relief, recognition, trust. The HOA woman, meanwhile, was spiraling. She tried to regain control of the narrative, but every word she spoke fell flat. Her power had evaporated in an instant. She had underestimated the weight of responsibility behind a parent's love, and more importantly, she had underestimated me. I allowed her a moment of silence before delivering the final blow. Let this be a lesson, not just for you, but for anyone who believes a badge or a title makes them untouchable. There are consequences to every action, especially when it comes to harming children. She couldn't respond. All she could do was stare, the clipboard dangling uselessly from her hand, her confidence shattered. And as we walked away, Lily safe in my arms, I realized something profound. Sometimes the person you least expect is the one who holds the power to change everything. The playground, once a place of fear, now felt like a battlefield we had survived. And the HOA woman, once a symbol of unchallenged authority, was about to face the consequences she had never imagined. After the black SUVs disappeared down the street, the playground felt almost empty. The air was heavy with tension, not just from what had happened, but from the realization that nothing would ever be the same. Lily clung to my hand as we walked slowly back toward our car. Her small fingers intertwined with mine like lifelines, and I could feel her still trembling from the encounter. She didn't speak much, but her eyes told me. Everything: confusion, fear, and an unspoken question. Why did someone hurt me? I kept my voice calm, steady. "You're safe now, baby. Daddy's here. Nothing can hurt you again." But I wasn't just protecting her from the immediate threat. I knew the real fight had just begun. The HOA woman, with her clipboard and her delusions of authority, had made a monumental mistake. She didn't realize that assaulting a child, especially an autistic child, would not stay contained in a few witness statements. There were cameras, there were parents, there were federal implications that she had no idea existed. That night, the neighborhood was buzzing. Social media was already lighting up with parents recounting what they had seen at the playground. Videos recorded on cell phones were circulating. The HOA woman's rant, her attempt to justify her actions, every detail she had thought she could control was now public. And the fear in her eyes? It had only begun. The next day, I received a call from the officer who had first responded. "We've opened an official investigation," he said. "We need all documentation, witness statements, and medical records for the child." I provided everything. Photos of the bruise on Lily's arm, testimonies from parents, even Lily's own behavioral report from her therapist, anything that proved she was a vulnerable child and that the HOA woman's actions were completely unjustified. By midweek, the HOA board was in chaos. They had underestimated the storm they were about to face. Emails flew back and forth among board members, trying to figure out how to cover up the incident, how to protect the woman who had attacked my daughter. But the truth couldn't be silenced. Then came the emails and phone calls that truly shook her. Reports were being compiled for the local news, and someone from the city's oversight office called to confirm that they had received complaints of child abuse tied directly to an HOA member. Her attempts to control the narrative were collapsing, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. One afternoon, she made a final desperate move. She sent a legal notice threatening me, my family, and even parents who had come forward. She cited harassment and false allegations. But by then, the weight of evidence against her was overwhelming. Witness statements, security footage, and multiple accounts from parents made her claims irrelevant. She had always believed that power, a badge, and an assumed superiority could protect her. But power isn't authority. Authority isn't justice. And justice, well, justice was coming for her. It wasn't just legal repercussions she faced. Word spread quickly among neighbors about her actions at the playground. People who had once admired her compliance with HOA rules now looked at her with disgust. Invitations were rescinded. She was quietly isolated, shunned by the community she had once thought she controlled. For Lily, the world slowly began to feel safe again. She returned to the playground weeks later, this time with me nearby and friends by her side. But I could see the lingering wariness in her eyes, the memory of that metal clipboard, the sharp, unfair anger, the realization that some adults could be dangerous. The HOA woman, meanwhile, was unraveling privately. Each call from lawyers, each formal notice, each parent testimony chipped away at her carefully constructed facade. She had underestimated one crucial fact, the power of a parent determined to protect their child. By the time the formal investigation concluded, the results were clear. She was removed from her position, permanently banned from holding any HOA office, and charged with assault on a minor. Her attempts to claim authority or influence anyone's perception failed completely. For the first time, she faced the reality that no badge or title could shield her from consequences. As I held Lily that evening, watching her swing gently and hum softly again, I realized something important. The trauma would never fully disappear, but justice had been served. The balance had been restored, not through anger, but through unwavering persistence, truth, and the courage to stand up against cruelty. This section of our story isn't just about punishment. It's about empowerment, about showing that even in the face of someone who abuses authority, the truth can prevail. It's about protecting the innocent, holding the guilty accountable, and making sure that children like Lily can feel safe in a world that often seems indifferent to their struggles. And while the HOA woman's story ended in defeat, Lily's story, our story, was just beginning. Because now she knew something important. There are people who will fight for her. There are people who will never let anyone hurt her with impunity. And that made all the difference. Even after the HOA woman had been formally removed and the legal proceedings were underway, the tension in our lives didn't vanish overnight. What had happened at the playground was traumatic enough, but what came next revealed something even more shocking, something that nobody, not even Lily, could have imagined. It started with a phone call late one evening. My phone buzzed, displaying a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a calm, authoritative voice greeted me. "Sir, this is Agent Morrison from the Federal Oversight Office. We've been reviewing some community complaints, and your recent report has triggered an internal review. May I speak with you about it?" I felt my stomach tighten. "Yes, of course," I said, keeping my tone steady. What followed changed the entire context of what had happened at that playground. The agent explained that during the investigation, they uncovered more than just the assault incident. Apparently, the HOA woman had a long history of overstepping boundaries, intimidating residents, and in some cases, threatening vulnerable individuals. It was worse than I had imagined, and it made her actions toward Lily far from an isolated incident. Then came the part that truly froze me. Agent Morrison leaned in metaphorically over the phone. "Sir, have you ever shared details about Lily's family background?" I hesitated. "Not with anyone but close family." "Why?" He responded slowly, deliberately, like he was choosing his words carefully. "The HOA woman had connections. She does background research on residents. She has access to records. She did not know who Lily's father was, but she tried to find out, and in doing so, she has unknowingly triggered a chain of events that could have endangered herself." I froze. It was only now that the magnitude of the situation hit me. She had no idea she was dealing with someone like me, and had she known, things might have escalated far beyond a simple assault report. This wasn't about vindictiveness. It was about reality. She had underestimated the consequences of her actions. Not only legally, but personally, she was about to face the full weight of accountability. The agent continued, "Your daughter's safety was always the priority. But what's more surprising is how quickly the community and the authorities responded once the assault was reported. Your intervention, combined with documented evidence, prevented any further escalation. Had this gone unreported, the woman's abuse could have continued unchecked. But now she is exposed legally, socially, and personally." I held the phone tightly. My mind replayed the events at the playground, the clipboard striking Lily's arm, her terrified eyes, the way the woman had smirked, thinking she was untouchable. Every detail, every second, now carried new significance. And then came the twist, the final piece that made my blood run cold, yet filled me with grim satisfaction. "Sir," Agent Morrison said, "we've discovered she has a network of influence connections with other HOA members, even legal advisors that she relied on to avoid accountability. But because of her actions toward your daughter, those connections are now compromised. Every person who once supported her is now under scrutiny because they allowed her behavior to persist. She underestimated the ripple effect of harming a child." I exhaled slowly, realizing just how narrowly we had escaped a much larger disaster. The HOA woman's arrogance, her belief in untouchable authority, had blinded her to one critical fact: there are consequences for harming the innocent, no matter who you think you are. I looked at Lily, sitting quietly on the couch, her small hands fidgeting with a stuffed toy. She didn't understand the complexity of these revelations, and she didn't need to. All she knew was that she was safe. She was home. And for now, that was enough. But the story wasn't over. The shockwaves of the incident continued to ripple through the community. Parents whispered, children asked questions, and the HOA board itself was in turmoil. People who once admired the woman for her strict enforcement of rules now shunned her. Invitations to social gatherings disappeared. Her online presence was flooded with posts about accountability, safety, and justice. Even worse for her, media outlets began to pick up the story. Local news channels reached out for interviews. Social media influencers discussed the incident, and the HOA woman's name was now synonymous with cruelty and abuse of power. She had tried to hide behind rules, procedures, and authority, but the truth had a way of surfacing. And this time, it was impossible to ignore. The final revelation, however, was personal. One morning, I received a letter from an attorney representing the woman. She was attempting to sue me, the community, and even the parents who had testified. But in doing so, she revealed the depth of her panic and her desperation. She had to admit facts she could not deny: the assault, the witnesses, the cameras. Every lie she tried to construct crumbled under the weight of documentation and evidence. It was a chilling reminder of how fragile arrogance can be. One careless action, striking an innocent child, had set off a chain reaction that would dismantle her carefully constructed world. And through it all, Lily remained untouched by her fear, secure in the knowledge that she had a father who would fight for her no matter what. That day, I realized something crucial. The HOA woman's downfall wasn't just punishment, it was a revelation. It showed the community the consequences of unchecked authority. It reminded parents everywhere that vigilance is essential. And most importantly, it taught Lily, in a way she might not fully understand yet, that she is protected, that her worth is unshakable, and that courage and truth can confront even the most arrogant of foes. As I tucked Lily into bed that night, her small body finally relaxed, her soft hum returning to fill the room, I felt a sense of closure mixed with lingering caution. The HOA woman had lost, but the lessons remained. Cruelty cannot hide behind authority, and protecting the innocent requires vigilance, courage, and sometimes unwavering persistence. The shocking revelations of that week would ripple through the community for months, and even though the incident had begun with fear and pain, it ended with accountability, exposure, and ultimately justice. And while Lily might never fully remember the clipboard, the look in the woman's eyes, or the fear she felt, she would carry the lesson with her for life. There are people who will fight for you no matter what, and justice can reach even the untouchable. The days after the incident at the playground were surreal. Even though the immediate threat, the HOA woman and her clipboard, had been removed, the aftermath was more complicated than I had anticipated. Every parent, neighbor, and community member who had witnessed the event or even heard about it seemed to carry a fragment of tension with them. Whispers traveled down streets. Parents exchanged wary glances. Children asked questions that they didn't fully understand. And amidst it all, Lily was trying to reclaim a world that had suddenly seemed unsafe. Lily is autistic. Her way of processing the world is different. Loud voices, sudden movements, and unpredictability can throw her off balance for hours, sometimes days. That's why the incident at the playground wasn't just a physical trauma, it was emotional. And as a parent, I carried the responsibility not just of protecting her body, but of guiding her through the waves of fear and confusion that followed. We started small, short visits to quiet playgrounds, slowly reintroducing her to familiar spaces. Gradually, she began to swing again, hum softly, and even make tentative eye contact with other children. Every small victory was a reminder that resilience isn't immediate, it's painstaking moment by moment. But as Lily healed, the community's response was equally important. Parents who had initially hesitated to come forward now spoke up openly. They recounted what they saw, what they heard, and how the HOA woman had overstepped boundaries repeatedly. Their testimonies became part of the official investigation. Each statement built a picture that left no room for doubt. The abuse was real, the behavior unacceptable, and the consequences inescapable. The HOA woman, on the other hand, was crumbling. Legal action, community backlash, and public scrutiny left her isolated. She tried desperately to defend herself, to justify her actions, to invoke her authority and influence, but nothing worked. Every attempt backfired. Her credibility had evaporated. Even her closest allies, who once excused minor aggressions as rule enforcement, were now wary of being associated with her. Then came the moment that truly marked the turning point. A public statement was issued acknowledging the harm she had caused, apologizing to my daughter, and committing the HOA to stronger protections for vulnerable residents. This was more than legal resolution, it was moral accountability. The very system she had tried to exploit to maintain control had now turned against her. Even with justice served, the most important transformation was in Lily. Slowly, tentatively, she learned that not every adult is a threat, that rules exist to protect, not punish unfairly, that there are people who will stand between her and harm, no matter how terrifying it seems. And in that understanding, she began to rebuild trust in herself, in the people around her, and in the idea that safety is not just a hope, but a reality when there are guardians who refuse to look away. For me, the lessons were equally profound. I realized that standing up for the vulnerable requires more than anger or fear. It requires clarity, patience, and strategic action. The HOA woman's mistake was not just attacking my daughter, it was underestimating the consequences of her actions and misjudging who she was challenging. In life, arrogance can be a dangerous blindfold, and in this case, it was catastrophic. As I reflect on everything that happened, I understand why stories like this matter. Not to sensationalize pain, but to illuminate truth, to show that abuse of authority can exist in subtle forms hidden behind rules and procedures, to remind parents everywhere that vigilance is essential, and to illustrate that courage, even in small doses, can ripple outward to create significant change. The final chapter of the story isn't about punishment, though the HOA woman faced consequences she could never have imagined. It's about protection, resilience, and justice. Lily now swings freely, hums her songs without fear, and laughs in ways that remind me why every battle we fought was worth it. The community has stronger oversight now, better awareness, and an understanding that children, especially vulnerable ones, are not obstacles to order, but people deserving of care, attention, and respect. And as for the HOA woman, her authority is gone. Her influence evaporated. The record of her actions exists in statements, reports, and videos. She is a reminder of the cost of arrogance and cruelty, A cautionary tale that every person who abuses power will eventually face accountability, even if they believe they are untouchable. So here's the truth I want every parent, every neighbor, every person watching this story to take away. Protection requires courage. Justice requires action. And even in the darkest moments, the right steps, taken with clarity and persistence, can transform fear into safety, harm into accountability, and despair into hope. This story ends with Lily safe, the community wiser, and the HOA woman exposed. But it also ends with a call to action for all of us. Never look away when a child is in danger. Stand up, speak out, document, protect. Because the next clipboard, the next abuse of authority may be waiting, and your intervention could be the difference between trauma and safety. If you've been touched by this story, share it. Protect the vulnerable. Speak against injustice. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel to ensure more stories like Lily's reach the world, reminding everyone that children deserve protection, authority requires responsibility, and courage is contagious. If this story moved you, if it made your heart ache for Lily, and if you believe that no child should ever face harm or cruelty, then don't stay silent. White heavy checkmark like this video to show that standing up against abuse matters. White heavy checkmark comment your city below. Let the world know you care. And I read every single one. White heavy checkmark share this story. Protect someone who might not have a voice. White heavy checkmark subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so we can continue to tell stories that expose injustice, protect the vulnerable, and remind the world that courage matters. Remember, speaking out can change lives, and your voice can be the difference between fear and safety. Stand with the children. Stand with justice. Stand with the truth.